am a small business and work hard's what I do. And if you're kind enough to try me, I'll work hard for you. I am a small business and work hard's what I do.
La décision des États-Unis de placer Jabhat Al-Nosra, un groupe djihadiste combattant aux côtés des rebelles, sur leur liste des organisations terroristes, a été vivement critiquée par des soutiens de l'opposition. Monsieur Fabius a ainsi estimé, mercredi, que tous les Arabes étaient vent debout contre la position américaine, parce que, sur le terrain, ils, Al-Nosra, font un bon boulot.
Donc la France a pris l'initiative, et elle est très très bien reçue, d'aider concrètement les gens. Et ça, nous le faisons à partir des comités qui ont été élus par la population. C'est intéressant à la fois parce que ça aide la population et puis parce que ça préfigure ce que va être la Syrie de demain, une fois que Bachar aura dégagé. Et c'est si intéressant que beaucoup de pays à travers le monde veulent se joindre à ce que nous avons commencé de faire.
This video is somewhat urgent. This is about the ongoing ethnic cleansing taking place across Syria, particularly villages along Syria's coastline. These are villages populated by ethnic and religious minorities, including Alawites, and also Christians. The terrorist-led provisional government of Syria, put into power by the United States, by its regional allies, including Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. They are going village to village, house to house. They are rounding people up and they are executing them in the streets. There are hundreds of videos, each video with sometimes tens or scores of dead people piled up, littering a field, lining a street. The footage is out there. It is on X. Be forewarned. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There are videos and pictures of beheadings. And this is what everyone had warned about since 2011, when the US began its proxy war against Syria to overthrow the government of President Bashar al-Assad. Everybody who had actually analyzed it and looked at the evidence could see that from the very beginning, very deliberately, starting all the way with preparations as far back as the Bush administration, I'm going to go over that in this video, they deliberately picked extremists they knew for a fact would go on a genocidal ethnic cleansing spree if ever they finally made it into power. They knew that, and they did it anyway. And that includes, for 4 years, under President Donald Trump, during his first term in office. And I'm going to go over all of that. Now, I want to point out the very deliberate hypocrisy the current US administration is exhibiting regarding this ethnic cleansing. I have just done a video on this. This is Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, February 27, 2025, on Thailand's forced return of Uyghurs to China. This is President Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, complaining to Thailand because Thailand will not allow Uyghur terror suspects to travel onward, almost certainly to Turkey, where they will cross the border into Syria and join Al-Qaeda, the very groups carrying out this ethnic cleansing in Syria right now as I speak. And he's condemning Thailand for sending these Uyghur terror suspects back to China because he claims China is carrying out a genocide against them. So he is fabricating claims of a genocide there's not a single photo or video to substantiate, despite the US making these claims for years. And he's ignoring an ongoing genocide. There are hundreds of photos and videos circulating online every single day since it began. So this is what I want to talk about. And I will start with this Guardian article here. This is the Western media admitting this. So if this is what the Western media is admitting, how much worse could it possibly be? It could be much worse than even this. So this is the Guardian. This is March 9th, 2025. More than 1,000 people killed in 2 days of clashes in Syria, War Monitor says. About 745 civilians among those killed in fighting in Latakia province between security forces and fighters loyal to former President Assad. And in this article, it says The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a UK-based monitor, said 745 civilians were killed, mostly execution style. And that is what the videos are showing. Again, I urge caution. I have to look at it. I look at it so that you don't have to look at it. But if you insist, just be warned that you will not be able to unsee what you see. And that is exactly what the videos are depicting. Obvious civilians, including teenagers and elderly, being executed in the streets. They have no weapons. They're wearing civilian clothes. They are obviously civilians. And these are a blend of just ethnic cleansing and reprisal killings, collective punishment, which are all war crimes, by the way. They say 125 Syrian security forces and 148 Assad loyalists were also killed. Death tolls from the 2 days of fighting have varied wildly, with some estimates putting the final death toll even higher, and it's almost certainly higher. It is in the thousands. From what I have just seen, you can see more than hundreds of people dead. It has to be at least over 1,000 at this point. Fighting began on Thursday after fighters loyal to the ousted Assad regime ambushed security forces in Jabhat in the coastal Latakia province. The wide-ranging coordinated assault was the biggest challenge to the country's Islamist authorities so far and came 3 months after opposition fighters led by Islamist rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham toppled the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a listed terrorist organization according to the UN, the United States, all of Europe, Russia, China. The whole world agrees these are terrorists, and that they're the ones who are running Syria right now, and they're the ones overseeing this ethnic cleansing. And even before these clashes started, precipitating this ethnic cleansing, these reprisal attacks by the so-called government, which is HTS, terrorists, Al-Qaeda. Is it impossible to imagine that not just Assad loyalists, but pretty much everyone in the country who are not extremists are living in fear and perhaps don't want to live under a internationally recognized terrorist organization? Then the article says, to crush the rebellion, the Syrian government, which is HTS, Al-Qaeda in Syria, called for reinforcements with thousands of fighters converging on Syria's coast from all over the country. Though fighters were nominally under the auspices of the new Syrian government, again, HTS, Al-Qaeda, militias still persist, some of which have been implicated in past human rights abuses and are relatively undisciplined. They are terror. They're on a terrorist list all around the globe for a reason. That is all they do, is engage in human rights violations. Videos showed dozens of people in civilian clothes piled up. So they're saying videos showed, almost every individual video showed dozens of people in civilian clothes piled up dead. They're talking about a specific town where more than 40 people were killed at one time, according to the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Other videos showed fighters wearing security uniforms, executing people point blank, ordering men to bark like dogs, and beating captives, and then, of course, killing them. Well, I have not actually seen a video where any of these people escape with their life. They are all humiliated, tortured, and then executed brutally. And it's not just Alawite Muslims, Assad loyalists being targeted here. It's also Christians. There's actually a number of ethnic and religious minorities being targeted. It includes Syria's ancient Christian communities. We have this article from Reuters that actually mentions it. All of these links will be in the video description below. But more than 1,000 killed in Syrian crackdown on Alawite region, War Monitor says. And if you scroll down, they talk about Christians along with Alawites fleeing their homes, fearing for their lives. So there's obviously a reason why Christians feel they could be targeted next, because they probably are being targeted. And it's convenient for the Western media, who played a direct role in precipitating this catastrophe very deliberately in the first place. It's very convenient for them to pretend that this is just targeting Assad support. It's a way of justifying what is ethnic cleansing and brutality against unarmed civilians, something that they had always accused the Syrian government of to justify the U.S. proxy war against it in the first place. This Guardian article also mentioned Syria's transitional president, Ahmad al-Shara, who is also known as Mohammed al-Jolani. So he is constantly being rebranded by the collective West, because once someone figures out who he actually is, they start asking questions about why is this man president? Why are we meeting with him? Why have we been supporting him all of these years? He is literally a terrorist. Let me show you how literally a terrorist he is. He is the leader of HTS. If you go to the current U.S. Department of State's website, their foreign terrorist organizations list, and you scroll down, Al-Nusra Front, aka Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is listed. It's been on the list since May 2014. It is still on the list. It's not been removed. There's also this BBC article that talks about Jolani, the current head of the Syrian transitional government, who is also the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Who are the rebels in Syria? This was from December 2024 as they were overthrowing the government with U.S., Turkish, Israeli, Persian Gulf state backing. And the article says, HTS was set up under a different name, Jabhat Al-Nosra, in 2011 as a direct affiliate of Al-Qaeda. The leader of the self-styled Islamic State group, al-Baghdadi, was also involved in its formation. So undeniably a terrorist organization. It is ISIS Al-Qaeda. It was regarded as one of the most effective and deadly of the groups ranged against President Assad. It was proscribed as a terrorist group by the UN, the US, Turkey, and other countries, and it remains so to this day. I just showed you it on the US State Department's list. They have to ask yourself, if the US admits that it spent billions of dollars every single year from 2011 onward, arming so-called moderate rebels, arming them, supplying them with equipment, Toyota pickup trucks, all kinds of training, how is it that Al-Qaeda ended up the most effective and deadly organization on the battlefield? I'll tell you, the simple answer is there were never any moderate rebels, ever. From the very beginning, the US deliberately armed extremists. They couldn't say that that's what they were doing. They claimed they were funding and backing moderate rebels. And then somehow all of this all of this money and material support was somehow just accidentally getting into the hands of these extremists. But I have an article for you from 2007, which laid out this entire plan long before it unfolded. This is the New Yorker. This is by legendary journalist Seymour Hersh. 2007 is titled The Redirection, a Strategic Shift. And it says right here, and I want you to look at this very carefully, to undermine Iran, which is predominantly Shia. The Bush administration has decided, in effect, to reconfigure its priorities in the Middle East. In Lebanon, the administration has cooperated with Saudi Arabia's government, which is Sunni, in clandestine operations that are intended to weaken Hezbollah, the Shia organization that is backed by Iran. The U.S. has also taken part in clandestine operations aimed at Iran and its ally Syria. A byproduct of these activities has been the bolstering of Sunni extremist groups that espouse the militant version of Islam and are hostile to America and sympathetic to Al-Qaeda, or are just outright literally Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda affiliates. And the rest of the article is all about how this was all being put into place. It mentions the Muslim Brotherhood. As I've pointed out many times before, Muslim Brotherhood has been a key instrument of first British imperial power across the Arab world and now American power over the Arab world. The point of me going over all of this, going all the way back to 2007, is to show you how deliberate this all was. They knew, these extremists, they wanted to approach, arm, back, prepare these extremists to fight and eventually overthrow these governments. And they knew, even back then, they knew that if they succeeded, they would carry out an ethnic bloodbath, which is exactly what is happening now. And by the way, I began this video talking about Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his hypocrisy, complaining about a non-existent genocide he claims is taking place against Uyghur terror suspects while remaining silent on this bloodbath taking place in Syria and also the genocide taking place in Palestine. I want to also point out that these Uyghurs that Secretary Rubio was defending are among the militants carrying out this ethnic cleansing. And I just want to show you this Economist article from January this year. Militant Uyghurs in Syria threaten the Chinese government. How much does China have to fear? And it says in the 2010s, many Uyghurs traveled to Turkey where they struggled. Across the border in war-torn Syria, rebels in control of the area around Idlib offered the Uyghurs a haven. It is not known exactly how many went. Most were civilians, but in 2017, Mr. Assad's ambassador to China said that about 4,000 to 5,000 Uyghurs were fighting in Syria. Some of these Uyghur militants joined the Islamic State. A majority, though, are associated with the Turkish Islamic Party, also known as the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, ETIM. When Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the dominant rebel group in Syria, took Aleppo in a surprise attack on November 29th, it rolled into the city with TIP fighters. A week later, with Mr. Assad about to fall, Abdul Haq al-Turkstani, the TIP's leader, released a statement. The Chinese disbelievers will soon taste the same torment that the disbelievers in Syria have tasted if God wills it, it read. And now they're fighting side by side, ISIS, Al-Qaeda fighters carrying out ethnic cleansing of Alawite and Christians in the western part of Syria, its coastline along the Mediterranean Sea. Secretary Rubio defending these terrorists who are involved in this ethnic cleansing means the Trump administration isn't just silently complicit, it is actively defending at least some of these terrorists who are involved in human rights violations and actual genocide taking place in Syria right now. Now, about the Trump administration's silent complicity. We may remember this from December last year. Trump says Syria, not our fight. Staying out may not be so easy. So the BBC is basically saying President Trump wants to wash his hands of Syria. It's not America's fight. That's their problem over there. We have nothing to do with it. We have no reason to be involved. But at the same time, even as I'm speaking, the Trump administration is maintaining U.S. troops in Syria. The United States military, under the Trump administration, by the direction of President Trump himself, have carried out strikes across Syria. Just not these terrorists carrying out ethnic cleansing along Syria's coast right now as I'm speaking. I want to go over what the previous Trump administration did over the course of 4 years to help perpetuate this conflict and eventually precipitate the catastrophe that we see now taking place today, this week. We remember President Trump during his first administration swearing he was going to end all of President Obama's wars. He ended up not ending a single one of them. As a matter of fact, he attempted to start several new wars, including a war with Iran, with the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who up to his death, his assassination by the US, was actually fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda across the region. It's almost as if the US, regardless of who was president, was actively cultivating and protecting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, not actually genuinely interested in stopping them. Of course, Trump supporters have told me that President Trump eliminated ISIS. So how could he possibly have been supporting ISIS? Well, ISIS is still active right now as I'm speaking. So obviously he did not. So let's go over some of the sanctions President Trump added to existing sanctions placed on Syria by the Obama administration, the continued occupation of Syria despite promises he would withdraw U.S. forces from Syria. They remain there to this day. And military operations carried out by the Trump administration during his first term in office meant to continue undermining the Syrian government and its ability to regain control over its country and end the fighting, to prevent this very outcome we see unfolding right now. So we have this from 2020. This was the Trump administration, the U.S. Department of State. Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act. This was a bunch of lies the Trump administration was telling about abuses under the Syrian government and all of the economic sanctions. Those fabricated claims were being used as a pretext to justify. And the goal always was to just hollow out, cripple, destroy the Syrian economy to precipitate the collapse of the Syrian government. And that is exactly what ended up happening, just not under the Trump administration. It ended up finally happening in 2024, December 2024, under the Biden administration. There's also the military strikes the Trump administration had been carrying out, again, to attack and undermine Syrian military capabilities, to help precipitate the collapse of the government, to precipitate the very catastrophe we see unfolding today. So this was NBC News. This was 2018. Trump announces strikes on Syria following suspected chemical weapons attack by Assad forces. There is zero evidence that Syria even had chemical weapons, let alone were using them to carry out strikes. And this was just a redux of the Iraq WMD lies that were told by the Bush administration to justify the otherwise illegal invasion occupation of Iraq from 2003, continuing all the way to this day, including under now 2 Trump administrations. Do we remember this one? President Trump promising to withdraw U.S. troops. Trump supporters telling me that, well, he wanted to, but the deep state sabotaged him. But every time someone would ask President Trump about U.S. troops in Syria, he would say, they're there to take the oil. And so we have articles like this. Trump contradicts aides and says troops in Syria only for oil. Do you remember that? Do you remember him making these claims?
We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
There were even articles like this. U.S. troops leaving Syria will go to Iraq, says Pentagon chief.Maybe there was a partial withdrawal, but U.S. troops continued because now, today, 2025, February 2025, this is NBC News. Defense Department drafting plans to withdraw all U.S. troops from Syria after recent Trump comments. So he said all throughout his first administration, he was going to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. He never did it. And when asked about it, he said they're there to take the oil. And now he's doing the exact same thing all over again. Although it's much more likely that U.S. troops will be withdrawn now because the mission has been accomplished. Syria has been completely destroyed. So it's only a matter of what the U.S. wants to do next and whether keeping troops there in Syria helps expedite that. And finally, I want to go over this from U.S. Central Command, February 22nd, 2025. So this was just last month. CENTCOM forces kill Al-Qaeda affiliate in northwest Syria. So the U.S. military, under the command of U.S. President Donald Trump, carried out strikes to kill an Al-Qaeda leader in Syria. He says it's not his fight, it's none of America's business, but he's keeping the troops there. He's carrying out strikes across Syria. He just will not strike al-Jawlani, whose location is well known. He struts through Damascus. He meets with Western leaders. At any time of President Trump's choosing, he could drop a bomb on al-Jawlani's head, the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria, a listed terrorist organization by the current U.S. State Department right here. But he's not doing it, and he's most likely not going to do it. And finally, I want to go back to what I started this video talking about. Secretary of State Marco Rubio complaining to Thailand and China about these Uyghur terrorists, claiming they're being genocided while these Uyghur terrorists themselves are actually engaged in real terrorism. I showed you this at the beginning of the video. This was a statement from Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. This was also accompanied by a security alert. It says, on 27 February 2025, the Royal Thai government deported a group of 45 Uyghur asylees to China. Similar deportations have prompted violent retaliatory attacks in the past. What they actually meant to say was terrorism. most notably in the wake of the 2015 deportation of Uyghurs from Thailand. Improvised explosive devices detonated at the Erawan Shrine in Bangkok, killing 20 people and injuring 125 others, as this shrine is heavily visited by tourists from China. So civilians, that is a terrorist attack, but President Donald Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is incapable of just saying it's a terrorist attack because he's defending these terrorists. And the United States, all along, has been using them as a tool to advance U.S. geopolitical objectives. And they're doing it to this very day. Now, that was the end of February. This was just last night. Bangkok Post, shock insurgent attack, kill, maim in Narathiwat, Patani. 3 dead, at least 13 injured. There were massive bombs that went off. You can see the destruction in just this one scene. The article says, black clad insurgents spread chaos at the border city on Saturday night, throwing bombs and shooting at the district office, killing 2 defense volunteers, wounding 11 others, and detonating explosives beside a railway track and outside a mall. So that was deliberately targeting civilians, places civilians would be. A security patrol was also attacked in adjoining Patani province, leaving 1 ranger dead and wounding 2 local officials. A pickup fully loaded with armed men wearing black clothing stopped outside the district office at 7:10 p.m. The attackers dismounted, threw bombs at the office building, and sprayed bullets at security volunteers on duty, and then sped off in the same vehicle they arrived in. They also detonated explosives hidden in a car and a motorcycle parked outside the district office compound. There is violence that takes place in the Deep South, but attacks this large and coordinated are extremely rare. And is it a coincidence that it has taken place just a few days after this veiled, not so veiled threat by the U.S. Secretary of State in the defense of terrorists, Uyghur terrorists who are involved in the ethnic cleansing taking place in Syria that I have just described to you in this video? The most concerning aspect of this terrorist attack in the Deep South is it is most likely not the full extent of this reprisal terrorism the U.S. has warned Thailand will suffer for disobeying U.S. demands. And again, the U.S. Embassy itself pointed out that in 2015, there was a large, high-profile terrorist attack in downtown Bangkok. So it's most likely something like that is also on its way, in addition to an uptick in the violence in the Deep South, which is also Western-backed separatism, has always been, and there are separatist movements the U.S. Has been backing and still to this day is backing, including in the wake of dismantling USAID and NED. All of the groups that were being supported by those organizations are still operating and still pursuing the division and destruction of Thailand, just like they have done to Syria now. So this is very serious. This affects everybody. You might not care what's going on in Syria today, but eventually it's going to come around to a place you do care about. The real reason I'm making this video is because regardless of how you feel about President Donald Trump and his administration, you can tag him, his administration, pro-Trump media, all across social media, and you could demand that they speak up about this. You could ask them why President Trump is dropping bombs on the head of some Al-Qaeda second-tier leader somewhere in rural Syria, but he's not dropping a head on al-Jawlani, the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. You can ask him that, and you can take his silence or his excuses as evidence of what I have been warning about all along: continuity of agenda, the reality that nothing is going to change by lending your support to this administration. This is evidence to help you understand that, accept that, and start thinking about what else you could do to get the change that you so deeply desire, the change that I so deeply desire. I am going to continue talking about this even if the Trump administration refuses to, even if pro-Trump media refuses to talk about this or hold the Trump administration accountable. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for all the other places you can find and follow my work. In the video description below are all of the links, and there's a lot of them for this video that I went over. You can check them out and read it all for yourself. There are also ways in the video description below, links to ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel, my Rumble channel, X. None of it is monetized. I depend solely on the generosity of my audience. You can help support my work through Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon, regardless of whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or if you have no resources to spare and you're just helping share my work with others. That is all greatly appreciated. That is what allows me to continue doing this work. So I thank you, and as always, thank you for watching.